Baghdad, Iraq, November 2005. An American convoy slows at an intersection in the Mansour district. The streets appear quiet, too quiet. A young specialist from the 3rd Infantry Division steps out to provide security while his team checks for IEDs. He scans the rooftops, the windows, the alleyways. His training kicks in. Check corners, watch for movement, stay alert. Everything seems clear. Then, a single crack echoes through the street. The specialist drops instantly. One shot, center mass. He's dead before he hits the ground. His squad dives for cover, weapons raised, scanning desperately for the shooter. But there's no muzzle flash, no movement, no second shot, no target. The sniper is already gone. The medic rushes to the fallen soldier, but it's too late. The round punched through his body armor at the perfect angle, a 1-in-a-million shot. Or was it? Within weeks, a video appears online. Grainy footage shows American soldiers through a rifle scope. The crosshairs track slowly, steadily. One shot rings out. A soldier falls. The video cuts to black for a moment, then another scene. Another American patrol. Another shot. Another soldier down. At the bottom of the screen, text appears in Arabic and English. Juba, the Baghdad sniper. Over the next 3 years, this phantom would claim responsibility for 143 American kills, release dozens of propaganda videos, and become the most hunted man in Iraq. The Americans offered massive rewards. They deployed the best counter-sniper teams in the world. They used every piece of technology available, from acoustic sensors to thermal imaging to drone surveillance. They never caught him. Some say he never existed, that he was pure propaganda, a ghost story told by insurgents to scare American soldiers. Others say he was everywhere, that Juba was a title passed between snipers like a deadly game of tag. A few intelligence officers remain convinced he was real. One man, impossibly skilled and impossibly lucky. This is the story of the sniper who won a psychological war without ever showing his face. A story about how modern warfare is fought not just with bullets, but with cameras and internet connections. A story that changed how America fights urban warfare forever. December 2005. A video file begins circulating on jihadist websites and forums. It's different from typical insurgent propaganda. This is professional, edited, deliberate. The video opens with nasheed, Islamic militant music, playing over slow-motion footage of American patrols moving through Baghdad's streets. The production quality is surprisingly high, almost cinematic. Then the perspective shifts. We're looking through a rifle scope now. Crosshairs track a soldier walking between vehicles. The reticle steadies. The shot. The impact. The soldier crumples. No blood, no graphic aftermath. Just the soldier falling. Clinical. Efficient. Terrifying. The video showed 8 separate kills. Each one a single shot from long range. Each one impossibly precise. Headshots, upper chest shots. Every round found its mark. And each one ending with the same signature, a fade to black and the name Juba in Arabic script with English subtitles. American intelligence officers who first analyzed the footage were stunned. The production quality suggested someone with media training, possibly even formal education in video editing. The shooting demonstrated professional sniper skills at a level rarely seen among insurgents. And the psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Within days, soldiers in Baghdad were talking about Juba. Within weeks, he had become a legend whispered about in mess halls and during guard duty. Within a month, his name was known across every American base in Iraq. Convoys moved faster through intersections. Patrols stayed in vehicles longer. Soldiers who used to stand on street corners providing security now crouched behind vehicle doors. Every rooftop, every window, every shadow became a potential threat. A sergeant from the 1st Cavalry Division described it in an interview years later. "We'd been dealing with IEDs, ambushes, RPG attacks for months. But this was different. This felt personal. This wasn't some faceless enemy planting bombs. This was one guy, one rifle, picking us off whenever he wanted. Like we were deer and he was hunting us for sport. And we couldn't do a damn thing about it. More videos followed throughout early 2006, each one more polished than the last. Juba's greatest hits compilations showed dozens of kills, always from extreme distance, always clean shots, always ending with the sniper escaping undetected. The videos weren't just documenting kills, they served multiple purposes, each one calculated for maximum effect. They were a recruiting tool, showing young men across the Middle East that Americans could be killed, that the mighty U.S. military wasn't invincible. They were a propaganda victory, proving the insurgency was winning against impossible odds. And they were a psychological weapon, a message to every American soldier: you are not safe, you are being watched, and you could be next. By mid-2006, Juba videos had been viewed millions of times across the Middle East and even in the West. They appeared on jihadist forums first, then leaked to LiveLeak, YouTube, and other video-sharing platforms before being taken down by moderators. But the internet has a long memory. They were mirrored, re-uploaded, and shared endlessly. The production evolved over time. Later videos included graphics showing supposed kill counts, maps of Baghdad with pins indicating shooting locations, and even what appeared to be training segments showing proper sniper techniques. Some videos featured multiple camera angles, suggesting a whole media team was embedded with the sniper. Others showed the shooter's perspective, loading magazines, checking his scope, waiting for hours in a hide position before taking the shot. It was propaganda elevated to an art form. But who was Juba? Where did he come from? Was he a former Iraqi army sniper seeking revenge? A foreign fighter from Chechnya or Afghanistan? American intelligence scrambled to identify him, to find any clue that might lead to his capture. What they discovered would prove more disturbing than anyone expected. The hunt for Juba became an obsession for American forces in Baghdad. Not just because of the kills, though those were tragic enough, but because he represented something that terrified military planners, an enemy who could adapt, who understood modern media, who was winning a propaganda war. Intelligence analysts at Camp Victory, the massive American base near Baghdad International Airport, created an entire task force dedicated to identifying and locating Juba. They combed through every frame of his videos, looking for identifying features, locations, patterns, anything that might give them a lead. But Juba was careful, meticulous, professional. His face never appeared in the videos, not once. His voice was never heard. No commands, no commentary, nothing. The locations were always anonymous rooftops or windows in Baghdad's sprawling urban landscape. Buildings that looked like 10,000 other buildings in the city. The analysts examined shadows in the footage to determine time of day and direction. They studied architectural features, trying to narrow down neighborhoods. They analyzed the sound of the gunshots, trying to determine caliber and weapon type. Every detail was scrutinized. What they did learn was disturbing. The shooting was professional grade, possibly even elite level. Shot placement was precise, almost always center mass or headshots that would guarantee an immediate kill. Distances ranged from 600 meters to over 800 meters, distances that required not just skill but extensive training and practice. And most remarkably, Juba almost always fired only one shot before disappearing. This suggested serious training, the kind that takes years to develop. Iraqi military snipers under Saddam Hussein had been trained by Soviet instructors during the Cold War and were considered competent but not exceptional. Saddam's snipers were good at what they did, but they weren't legendary. This was something else entirely. This was precision that suggested either special forces training or extensive combat experience, possibly both. Some intelligence officers theorized Juba was a foreign fighter, possibly from Chechnya, where Russian counterinsurgency operations had created a generation of battle-hardened snipers. The Chechens had been fighting the Russians in brutal urban warfare for over a decade. Their snipers were among the best in the world, men who'd learned their craft in the rubble of Grozny. Others believed he might have come from Syria or Iran, countries known for training insurgent fighters and providing them to Iraqi resistance groups. Iranian Revolutionary Guard advisors were known to be operating in Iraq, teaching insurgents advanced tactics. Some of these advisors had fought in the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s and knew urban combat intimately. There was also speculation that Juba might have been trained by Hezbollah instructors. The Lebanese militant group had been fighting Israel for decades and had developed sophisticated urban warfare tactics. They ran training camps for insurgents from across the Middle East. But there was another theory, one that was even more troubling. Juba might not be one person at all. A CIA analyst working in the Green Zone, the fortified international zone in central Baghdad, noticed something odd in the videos. The rifle scopes appeared different across various clips. Some footage showed what looked like a Dragunov SVD scope, a Russian-made sniper rifle that had been common in the Iraqi army. Others showed Western optics, possibly captured American equipment or commercial hunting scopes purchased in neighboring countries. The shooting positions varied too. Some showed extremely stable shooting stances with bipods or sandbag rests, suggesting a well-prepared hide position. Others showed hurried shots from improvised positions, more opportunistic than planned. Even the skill level seemed inconsistent. Some shots were incredibly difficult, moving targets at extreme range. Others were relatively easy, stationary soldiers at moderate distances. His conclusion, shared in a classified intelligence assessment: Juba might be a brand name, a myth deliberately created by insurgent propaganda units. Multiple snipers operating across Baghdad, all taking credit under the same pseudonym to amplify the psychological effect. Think of it like a franchise. One successful sniper starts making videos. The propaganda value is recognized, so other snipers start submitting their footage to the same editors. All of it gets released under the Juba brand. The Americans think they're hunting one man. In reality, they're hunting a ghost, a concept, an idea. This theory gained traction when interrogators questioned captured insurgents. Some claimed to have met Juba. Others said they'd heard he was killed months earlier. A few insisted he was still active. The stories contradicted each other wildly. One captured fighter told interrogators that Juba was actually a title, passed from sniper to sniper when one was killed or stopped operating. Like Dread Pirate Roberts in The Princess Bride, a name that represented an idea rather than a person. Whether one man or many, whether real or myth, the impact was undeniable. By mid-2006, Juba videos had been viewed millions of times across the Middle East. Young men watching from Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt saw proof that American soldiers could be killed by a single fighter with skill and patience. They saw American military superiority challenged by one man with a rifle. The propaganda value was incalculable. Every view, every share, every discussion about Juba served the insurgency's purposes. They didn't need to kill every American soldier. They just needed to make every American soldier afraid. But Juba's tactics weren't just about marksmanship. His real weapon was something far more powerful than any rifle. It was fear. It was doubt. It was the psychological pressure that comes from knowing you're being hunted, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it was working perfectly, changing how American forces operated across the entire city. The true genius of Juba, whether he was one person or many, wasn't his shooting ability. It was his handlers' understanding of psychological warfare and how modern media could amplify fear across an entire military force. Every American soldier in Baghdad knew about him by early 2006. They'd seen the videos, either leaked online or shown during intelligence briefings. They'd heard the stories, passed soldier to soldier like urban legends, and they knew that any moment they were exposed, Juba or someone like him could be watching through a scope. This changed everything about how American forces operated. Patrols that used to dismount and walk through neighborhoods, gathering intelligence and building relationships with locals, now stayed mounted in vehicles. The Humvees and MRAPs offered some protection, psychological comfort, even if a sniper round could potentially penetrate. Soldiers who used to stand security in open areas, covering their buddies during vehicle maintenance or supply drops, now hid behind concrete barriers. T-walls, those massive concrete blast barriers that lined every base and checkpoint, became psychological shields as much as physical ones. Every movement outside the wire was calculated to minimize exposure. Sprint between vehicles, don't stand still, keep your head down, move unpredictably. These became mantras repeated in pre-patrol briefings. A lieutenant from the 10th Mountain Division explained years later in an interview, "Juba got into our heads in a way the IEDs never did. With a bomb, you could tell yourself you're being careful, watching for disturbed earth, checking for wires. You felt like you had some control. But with a sniper at 800 meters, what are you supposed to do? You never even knew where the shot came from. One second your buddy is standing next to you, the next he's dead on the ground, and there's nothing, no sound, no warning, nothing." He continued, "We'd be at a checkpoint and someone would joke, 'Watch out for Juba,' and everyone would laugh, but it was nervous laughter. You could see it in their eyes, the fear, the paranoia. They were scanning rooftops constantly. Some guys developed twitches, couldn't stop looking around. We all were scared, even if we didn't want to admit it." The psychological toll went beyond fear. It was the helplessness. With an IED, you could use metal detectors, change routes, employ route clearance teams. There were countermeasures, things you could do that made you feel like you were fighting back. With an ambush, you could return fire, call for support, maneuver, and fight back. There was action, response, agency. But with a sniper at extreme range, you never even knew where the shot came from. There was no fighting back, no response possible. One shot and your buddy was dead. And the shooter was gone before you even realized you were under attack. This is exactly what Juba's handlers wanted. This was the goal from the beginning. Every American soldier looking over their shoulder was one less soldier focused on their actual mission. Every convoy that rushed through intersections to minimize exposure was easier to hit with IEDs because they weren't taking time to check for bombs. Every patrol that stayed mounted in vehicles couldn't gather human intelligence or build relationships with local Iraqis. The second-order effects were devastating to American counterinsurgency efforts. The whole strategy in Iraq by 2006 was clear, hold, build. Clear areas of insurgents, hold them with persistent presence, build relationships with locals to gather intelligence, and isolate the fighters from the population. But you can't hold an area from inside a vehicle. You can't build relationships hiding behind concrete walls. Juba was making effective counterinsurgency nearly impossible in Baghdad. The propaganda amplified the effect exponentially. New Juba videos appeared every few months throughout 2006 and into 2007, each claiming more kills, each reinforcing the myth, each adding to the psychological pressure. Insurgent media outlets, particularly the Islamic Army in Iraq, which claimed to represent Juba, began producing supplementary content. Interviews with sources close to Juba describing his dedication and skill. Articles analyzing his tactics. Even poetry praising him as a hero of the resistance. They called him the American Nightmare and the Baghdad Sniper. Some propaganda pieces referred to him as the Hunter or the Ghost. Each name added to the mystique, to the fear. Western media, perhaps inadvertently, picked up the story and amplified it further. Articles appeared in major newspapers analyzing the Juba phenomenon. News segments on CNN, Fox News, and other networks featured expert analysis of Juba's tactics. Families back home heard about the mysterious sniper hunting their loved ones. This created a feedback loop. Iraqi insurgents saw that Western media was covering Juba, which proved the propaganda was working, so they made more videos, which led to more Western media coverage, which increased the psychological impact on soldiers, which made the propaganda more effective, and on and on. Some military public affairs officers tried to downplay Juba, arguing that talking about him only served insurgent purposes. But the cat was out of the bag. You can't unsee a video. You can't unknow that threat. Soldiers wrote home about Juba. Wives and mothers started reading about him online. The fear spread beyond Iraq to families across America. That psychological impact, the worry and stress on families, affected soldier morale even further. This was asymmetric warfare at its finest. One man, or a few men, using a rifle and a camera to impact the morale and operational effectiveness of an entire military force numbering over 100,000 troops in Iraq. By 2007, Juba had become more valuable alive than dead. As a symbol, as a myth, he was worth more than any tactical victory. The insurgency understood this perfectly. Whether the original Juba was dead or alive didn't matter anymore. The brand had transcended the man. But the U.S. military wasn't going to let a ghost, real or imagined, dictate how they operated in their own battle space. They brought in specialists, the best counter-sniper teams in the world, equipped with technology that could see through walls and detect a gunshot before the bullet even hit its target. The Americans were done playing defense. The hunt was about to get serious and deadly. The American response to Juba was massive, sophisticated, and expensive. If the insurgency wanted to make this a sniper war, the U.S. military would show them what a real sniper program looked like. Counter-sniper teams from U.S. Marine Scout Snipers and Army sharpshooter units were deployed throughout Baghdad with one mission: find and eliminate enemy snipers. These weren't regular infantry. These were the best marksmen in the U.S. military, experts in the exact craft Juba claimed to have mastered. Marine Scout Snipers had been perfecting their craft since World War II. Their training was legendary, months of grueling instruction in fieldcraft, marksmanship, stalking, and observation. They could shoot accurately out to 1,000 meters and beyond. They could hide in plain sight for days. They were patient, professional, and utterly dedicated to their craft. Army snipers from units like the 75th Ranger Regiment and various infantry divisions brought similar skills. Some had already deployed multiple times to Iraq and Afghanistan. They'd hunted insurgents in Fallujah, Ramadi, and Mosul. They knew urban warfare intimately. But skills alone weren't enough. They brought technology that seemed like science fiction. Boomerang 3 acoustic detection systems were mounted on vehicles and buildings throughout Baghdad. These sophisticated sensors could detect the sound of a gunshot, analyze the acoustic signature, calculate the direction and distance using triangulation, and point troops toward the shooter's position, all within seconds of the shot being fired. The system worked by detecting the shock wave of the bullet passing through air and the muzzle blast from the weapon. By analyzing the time difference between these two sounds hitting multiple sensors, the computer could calculate a precise direction and approximate range. For the first time, American forces could instantly know where a shot came from. The sniper's greatest advantage, remaining undetected after shooting, was being stripped away. Thermal imaging systems scanned rooftops and buildings 24/7, looking for heat signatures. Modern thermal optics could detect body heat through light cover and even sometimes through walls. A sniper hiding in a building might be invisible to the naked eye, but would glow white-hot in thermal imaging. Drone surveillance provided constant overwatch for patrols, watching from angles snipers couldn't anticipate. Small Raven and larger Predator drones circled overhead, their cameras scanning, recording, transmitting real-time video to tactical operations centers. If a patrol took sniper fire, the drone footage could be rewound and analyzed to spot the shooter's position, his escape route, where he went afterward. This intelligence led to raids hours or days later, scooping up insurgents who thought they'd gotten away clean. Counter-sniper teams set up in concealed positions across known danger areas, sometimes remaining motionless for 12, 18, even 24 hours or more, waiting for Juba or his copycats to take a shot. They used advanced hide techniques, full ghillie suits that made them blend perfectly into rubble and debris. They had patience that matched or exceeded any insurgent. And they had the support infrastructure to stay in position indefinitely, with resupply and relief teams rotating in and out. The tactics evolved into a deadly game of cat and mouse, hunter and hunted, with both sides learning and adapting constantly. When insurgent snipers fired, they had seconds, maybe a minute at most, to escape before American counterfire arrived. The boomerang systems would detect the shot, mark the location, and within moments, suppressive fire from machine guns and grenade launchers would rake the building. Close air support, Apache helicopters, or fast movers could arrive in minutes. American snipers began using bait tactics, having one soldier deliberately expose himself in a predictable location while teammates watched from concealed positions with rifles ready. It was dangerous, incredibly dangerous, but it worked. When an insurgent sniper took the bait and fired, American snipers would immediately engage. Sometimes they'd even let the insurgent take a second shot to better pinpoint his location, then return fire with precision that insurgent snipers couldn't match. In March 2007, a Marine scout sniper team in Ramadi spotted an insurgent sniper setting up in a mosque minaret. They watched him through their scope as he positioned his rifle toward an American checkpoint 400 meters away. The Marines could have engaged immediately, but they waited. They wanted confirmation. The insurgent sniper settled behind his rifle, adjusted his scope, and prepared to shoot. The moment his finger touched the trigger, the Marine sniper fired. One shot from 900 meters away. If it is in English, use a clear, natural American English accent. If it is in another language, use a clear, natural accent for that language. Read it at a normal pace. The insurgent sniper died instantly, shot through the head, his body slumping forward over his own rifle. He wasn't Juba. Just another fighter, maybe one who'd watched the videos and thought he could replicate the success, or maybe someone who deliberately used the name for credibility. Either way, he was dead. This became the pattern throughout 2007 and into 2008. American counter-snipers killed dozens of insurgent marksmen. Some were genuinely skilled, former military snipers or men with natural talent and lots of practice. Most were amateurs, enthusiastic but poorly trained, who'd watched the Juba videos and thought it looked easy. They learned the hard way that it wasn't. But the real Juba, if he existed as a single individual, if he was more than a propaganda construct, was never confirmed killed. Intelligence reports from captured insurgents provided conflicting information. Some claimed Juba had been killed in Fallujah during major operations in 2006. Others said he'd fled to Syria when American forces got too close. A few claimed he'd retired, that he'd killed enough Americans and disappeared into civilian life. One captured insurgent, a former propaganda coordinator for the Islamic Army in Iraq, told interrogators that Juba had been killed in 2007, but the organization decided to keep making videos using his name. The brand was too valuable to let die with the man. Another prisoner claimed Juba was alive and well, but had stopped operating because the counter-sniper effort made it too dangerous. According to this source, Juba had moved to Syria, where he was training the next generation of insurgent snipers. Yet another insisted Juba had never been one person, that from the very beginning it was multiple shooters using the same pseudonym. The Americans offered massive rewards for information leading to Juba's capture. They interrogated hundreds of prisoners. They raided safe houses where the videos were allegedly produced and edited. They tracked down insurgent media coordinators and squeezed them for information. But they never found definitive proof of Juba's identity or fate. No body, no confirmed kill, No capture. Just rumors and contradictions and dead ends. Yet the videos kept coming throughout 2007 and 2008. New footage, new supposed kills, same signature style and branding. Either Juba was immortal, surviving every American attempt to kill him, or the myth had grown beyond any one man, becoming something that couldn't be killed with bullets. And that made him more dangerous than ever, because how do you fight an idea? By 2008, Juba had transcended being just a sniper, even a legendary one. He'd become a media franchise, a brand, a symbol that represented resistance against American occupation. The propaganda wing of various insurgent groups, particularly the Islamic Army in Iraq, which had claimed Juba from the beginning, released increasingly sophisticated videos under the Juba brand. The production values improved dramatically. Graphics became slicker and more professional. The messaging became more refined and targeted. Some videos showed compilation footage set to music, marketed like action movie trailers. Slow-motion shots of American patrols. Dramatic music building tension. The scope, view, the shot, the impact. Repeat. They were edited like Hollywood productions, complete with dramatic cuts and sound design. Others featured tactical breakdowns, almost like instructional content, showing aspiring jihadist snipers how to select shooting positions, how to calculate range and windage, how to plan escape routes after shooting. These were training videos disguised as propaganda, serving dual purposes. The videos spread far beyond jihadist forums. They appeared on YouTube, Google Video, LiveLeak, and other mainstream platforms before being flagged and taken down by moderators. But the internet never forgets. They were downloaded, mirrored to other servers, re-uploaded under different names, and shared millions of times. Young men across the Middle East downloaded them on their phones, traded them on USB drives, burned them to CDs. They became underground hits, the kind of forbidden content that circulates despite all efforts to suppress it. They became recruiting tools for Al-Qaeda in Iraq and other insurgent groups. Come to Iraq and be like Juba wasn't just a slogan, it was a genuine draw for foreign fighters. Intelligence reports showed that captured foreign fighters frequently mentioned Juba videos as part of their radicalization process. One Saudi fighter captured in Mosul in 2008 told interrogators, "I watched Juba videos for months before I came to Iraq. I thought if one man could kill so many Americans, imagine what I could do. He made it look easy. He made it look honorable." The propaganda effect extended beyond just recruiting fighters. The videos influenced public opinion across the Middle East, feeding narratives that the American occupation was failing, that resistance was not only possible but successful. Western media, perhaps unwittingly, amplified the propaganda. News articles analyzing Juba's tactics gave him credibility and spread his legend to audiences who would never visit jihadist forums. Television segments about the deadliest sniper targeting U.S. troops made him infamous and increased his notoriety. Major news networks ran segments trying to answer the question, who is Juba? They interviewed military analysts, former snipers, intelligence experts. They showed clips from the propaganda videos, albeit usually censored, but they showed them nonetheless. Every mention in Western media increased his legend, proved the propaganda was working, and encouraged the insurgency to produce more content. Some journalists and military analysts later criticized this coverage, arguing that Western media had done Juba's propaganda work for him. By reporting on him, by trying to analyze and understand him, they'd inadvertently spread his myth to a global audience. But the reality was more complex and nuanced. The story was genuinely newsworthy. American soldiers were being killed by a skilled sniper or group of snipers, and the public back home had a right to know what their soldiers were facing. The line between legitimate reporting and amplifying enemy propaganda became blurred and difficult to navigate. By 2009, as the Iraq surge reduced violence across the country and American forces began drawing down their presence, Juba videos became less frequent. The last widely circulated video appeared in late 2009, claiming 37 additional kills over a 6-month period, and bringing the total supposed count to over 140. Then, silence. No more videos, no more claims, no more Juba. The Baghdad sniper simply disappeared from the narrative as suddenly as he'd appeared 4 years earlier. Some interpreted this as proof he'd been killed, and the insurgency couldn't maintain the fiction without actual footage. Others believed he'd simply moved on, either leaving Iraq or retiring from active operations. A third theory suggested the propaganda had run its course, that audiences had become desensitized to the videos and they were no longer generating the psychological impact that justified the effort of producing them. Whatever the reason, Juba's era had ended, but his legacy would continue. So what happened to Juba? Was he killed in a firefight and his death never properly documented? Did he flee Iraq when the insurgency collapsed under American pressure? Or was he never real to begin with, just smoke and mirrors and clever editing? The truth might be more complicated than any single answer, and that complexity might be the whole point. 15 years after the last Juba video, after American forces have withdrawn from Iraq and the Islamic State has risen and fallen, the truth remains frustratingly elusive. Multiple former U.S. intelligence officers who worked the Juba case during their tours in Iraq have given interviews over the years, and their conclusions contradict each other wildly. Some remain convinced Juba was a single individual, a highly skilled sniper who operated in Baghdad from 2005 to 2009 and either died in combat or successfully escaped to Syria or Iran. They point to consistent elements in the videos, certain shooting techniques that appear repeatedly, a particular style that suggests one person's work. One retired Army intelligence colonel stated in a 2015 interview, "I spent 2 years hunting this guy, and I'm convinced he was real. One person, highly trained, incredibly disciplined. We came close to getting him 3 times. 3 times we raided locations within hours of him being there." He was always one step ahead. Others are equally certain he was always a propaganda construct, a composite character built from the actions of multiple insurgent snipers to create a mythic figure that could inspire fighters and terrify enemies. They point to inconsistencies in the videos, varying skill levels, different weapons and optics, contradictory reports from prisoners. A former CIA analyst who worked in Baghdad said, "Juba was brilliant propaganda precisely because he wasn't real. You can't kill a fictional character. Every time we killed an insurgent sniper, the propaganda office just released another video under the Juba name. It was genius." The evidence, analyzed objectively years later with the benefit of hindsight, suggests the truth is somewhere in between, more complex than either extreme position. It's likely that an original Juba existed, a skilled marksman who made the early videos in late 2005 and early 2006, who scored genuine kills against American forces and had the ability and discipline to escape after shooting. His success, combined with savvy propaganda efforts by insurgent media coordinators, created the legend. That success inspired copycats. Other snipers, seeing the impact of the videos and the fear they generated, wanted to be part of the phenomenon. Some probably claimed to be Juba. Others submitted their own footage to insurgent propaganda units who gladly added it to the collection. As more snipers operated under the Juba name or had their actions attributed to him, the original man may have been killed, captured, or simply stopped operating. But the brand was too valuable, too effective, too perfect as a propaganda tool to let die with one man. So the videos continued, cobbled together from footage of different shooters, all credited to the same phantom. The myth had become self-sustaining, no longer dependent on any one person. This theory explains the inconsistencies in the videos that analysts noticed, the varying skill levels displayed across different clips, and the impossible number of claimed kills for one person operating over multiple years. It also explains why Juba was never definitively killed or captured despite intensive efforts. You can't kill a brand. You can't capture an idea. A former Marine intelligence officer who spent 2 years working counter-sniper operations put it perfectly. Did a sniper named Juba kill American soldiers in Baghdad? Probably, yes. Did he personally kill 143 Americans like the propaganda claimed? Absolutely not. Did he exist as the myth portrayed him, this invincible ghost who could strike anywhere and never be caught? No. But did that myth cause real damage to our forces? Absolutely. In the end, it doesn't matter if he was real. The effect was real. The fear was real. The operational changes we had to make were real. The psychological impact outlasted the actual threat by years. American soldiers who deployed to Iraq in 2010 and 2011, long after the last Juba video, still knew the name and still took precautions against snipers. The myth had become self-sustaining, passed from unit to unit during handovers, part of the institutional knowledge about threats in Iraq. Interestingly, when ISIS rose to power in Iraq and Syria in 2014, they attempted to create their own version of the Juba phenomenon. They released sniper compilation videos with similar production styles, dramatic music, and scope footage. They tried to create legendary snipers to match Juba's psychological impact. But it never caught on the same way. The moment had passed. The novelty was gone. Audiences had become somewhat desensitized to the content. The mystique couldn't be replicated because it had been unique to a specific time and place. The legacy of Juba lives on in military doctrine and training. Modern counterinsurgency courses include sections on combating enemy propaganda narratives. Soldiers are taught about the Juba phenomenon as a case study in psychological warfare. The lessons learned about counter-sniper operations have been incorporated into urban warfare training. Some of the technology deployed to counter Juba, like acoustic detection systems, is now standard equipment. The tactics developed by American snipers hunting him have been refined and taught to new generations of marksmen. But perhaps the most important legacy is the recognition that modern warfare isn't just fought with bullets and bombs. It's fought with cameras and internet connections, with narratives and myths and psychological operations. Juba proved that a few skilled individuals, or even just a well-crafted myth, could impact the behavior and morale of thousands of soldiers. Every American patrol that changed routes because of sniper fears, every convoy that sped through intersections, every soldier who hesitated before stepping into the open was a small victory for the insurgency. And all of it came from videos that may or may not have shown a real person, that may or may not have depicted actual kills, that may or may not have been anything more than clever propaganda. That's the real terror of Juba. Not the bullets, but the doubt. Not the kills, but the fear. Not the man, but the myth. Soldiers. Every American patrol that changed routes because of sniper fears, every convoy that sped through intersections, every soldier who hesitated before stepping into the open was a small victory for the insurgency. And all of it came from videos that may or may not have shown a real person, that may or may not have depicted actual kills, that may or may not have been anything more than clever propaganda. That's the real terror of Juba. Not the bullets, but the doubt. Not the kills, but the fear. Not the man, but the myth. Not the bullets, but the doubt. Not the kills, but the fear. Not the man, but the myth. Conclusion 3130 through 350. The story of Juba isn't really about one sniper, or even about snipers at all. It's about how modern warfare has evolved beyond bullets and bombs into a battle for minds and morale, for perception and narrative. In previous wars, propaganda required control of newspapers, radio stations, television networks. It was slow, expensive, centralized, and could be countered by enemy propaganda with similar resources. Governments and militaries had near monopolies on the ability to shape narratives. But in Iraq, a cell phone camera, a rifle scope, video editing software, and an internet connection created a propaganda weapon more effective than any previous technology. The barriers to entry had collapsed. Anyone could participate in the information war. Juba proved that asymmetric warfare wasn't just about tactics and weapons, it was about storytelling and myth-making. A few skilled individuals, or a propaganda team creating a fictional character, could impact the behavior of thousands of soldiers. Every American patrol that changed tactics, every convoy that altered routes, every soldier who looked over their shoulder was a small victory for the insurgency. The total tactical cost of Juba to American forces is impossible to calculate with precision. If we accept even half of his claimed kills as legitimate across multiple shooters using the name, that's 70 to 80 American deaths directly attributable to the Juba phenomenon. Each one of those was a tragedy, a life cut short, a family devastated. But the operational impact was far larger and more significant than just the body count. The countless man-hours spent hunting him, the resources devoted to counter-sniper operations, the expensive technology deployed, the psychological toll on troops, the changes to tactics and procedures all represented a massive return on investment for the insurgency. If it is in English, use a clear, natural American English accent. If it is in another language, use a clear, natural accent for that language. Read it at a normal pace. If Juba cost the insurgency nothing more than one skilled sniper and a propaganda team with basic video equipment, the return was astronomical. They shaped how the most powerful military in the world operated in its own occupied territory. Modern militaries have learned from this, though perhaps not quickly enough. Today's counterinsurgency and counterterrorism doctrine includes extensive sections on combating enemy propaganda narratives. Social media monitoring has become as important as signals intelligence. Information operations officers are now embedded with combat units. The information space is now officially recognized as a battlefield equal to physical terrain, as important as air superiority or control of the seas. But the lesson cuts both ways, and this is where it gets complicated. If it is in English, use a clear, natural American English accent. If it is in another language, use a clear, natural accent for that language. Read it at a normal pace. If an insurgency can create a mythical sniper who impacts enemy operations, what can state militaries do with even greater resources, more sophisticated technology, and professional propaganda teams? The same techniques, the same psychological principles that made Juba effective are now being employed by every military force with a media wing. American, Russian, Chinese, Israeli forces all produce content designed to intimidate enemies and boost friendly morale. The difference is resources and sophistication. What insurgents did with cell phone cameras, state militaries do with cinema-quality production, social media campaigns, and coordinated information operations across multiple platforms. The ghost of Juba still haunts military planners and propagandists alike. Not because of who he was, or even whether he was real, but because of what he represented. Proof that in modern warfare, a powerful story can be as deadly as the most advanced weapon system. In an era where everyone has a camera and access to global communication networks, where video can be edited on a laptop and distributed to millions instantly, the potential for this kind of psychological warfare has only increased. Future conflicts will be fought simultaneously on physical battlefields and in information space. The side that controls the narrative, that shapes perception, that wins hearts and minds, may have advantages as significant as air superiority or technological edge. Was there ever a real Juba? One person, the legendary sniper of Baghdad? Maybe, probably, at least initially. Does it matter? Not really, not anymore. The myth was real enough. The psychological impact was real. The fear was real. The changes to American operations were real. And the lesson remains. Modern warfare isn't just about who has the better weapons or the more skilled soldiers. It's about who tells the better story, who creates the more compelling narrative.